Hey there, welcome back to the Curious History Student. I wanted to do a story about the Battle of Somme. This is in direct response to one of the postings I made from our university website and a request from one of my professors to do a video on one of the subjects in our discussion forums at University of North Florida. Now keep in mind, this is also going to be repetitive because it's already a posting on one of the websites, but it's a narrative that I formulated from my own research and a tactical report based on records that I've studied in the past. And I've been studying this setup for about 3 years, so I believe I have a good historical account of it. Now, historically, the Battle of Somme was said that the Germans were not prepared for this type of attack with the British. However, the methods of their defensive posture otherwise kind of control that narrative to be false, in my view. Now, I can tell you this, we have to be really careful on how we pick parts in history to formulate narratives to tell a story. I say this because you don't want to really formulate a biased opinion. But without further ado, let's go on ahead and get into the Great War and the Battle of Somme. So the Great War became something that really nobody could imagine possible. It was pretty brutal. It was a war of nations, but it was kind of more than that. It was more of a war of attrition. Germany at the time didn't want to go to a two-front war. In fact, the High Command pretty much stated as such. They were very adamant about how their resources would be stretched very thin on Germany's end. So despite the warnings, there was kind of really no backing down. Germany was already all in, and their resources were pretty much running low. And in Germany's eyes, the fatherland had to actually push forward. So they created a really good tactical plan. Now, the British and the French were really giving them an opening here, and they didn't realize that. It was really bad intel on the British side on what was actually going on in the hearts and minds of German high command. Their forces saw pretty much a dividing line between the north and the south. Britain's ranks stretched all the way throughout the north, in fact, a little too thin, while the French held the southern line. And Germany saw this as an opportunity to kind of seize that. First, Germany entrenched upon the upper reaches of Somme, digging in really deep, and the earth kind of became their cover. Machine gun nests were in place, hidden beneath many of the layers that were reinforced inside the trenches. And they formulated more of a zigzag pattern, which really helped them out when shelling was pretty much in operation from the British side. So the land pretty much could kind of burn, but beneath it, they were pretty much safely tucked away. German troops really never felt the full brunt of the shelling when the British opened up in Somme. So while that was happening and Germany was preparing for the Battle of Somme, they kind of poured everything that they had down south into Verdun. And they were hammering the French pretty much day after day, and the French were hit pretty hard, and their lines were pretty much cut in half, and that strategy kind of worked, and France was kind of at the end of their rope. But the success for France was, as Germany, having pouring all those resources in, they kind of dwindled on everything. Ammunition, coal, oil, manpower were kind of at their limit. So each day became more of a fight against not only the enemy, but against exhaustion and a lack of resources. But even if they managed to kind of catch any type of element of the environment to kind of like be in favor of their troops, increase morale or anything, it was kind of short-lived for every single soldier that was on the line on the German side near France and over in Verdun. Sorry about that. Now, let's talk about the food, because they were dwindling on food resources as well. And I want you to kind of get a small visual. I'm not going to get too disgusting here, but even if they were able to catch a rat in the trenches, which there were thousands, in fact, millions of them. Uh, you had to not only eat what was on the rat, which was pretty much laden with lice. Think about what the rats were eating. When they caught the rats were scavenging alongside the fallen soldiers, their brothers in arms. Now think about that. The rats had to eat something too, so what else was there for them to kind of consume? So it was kind of like not a dish that the standard soldier wanted to eat, and that happened basically on both sides. The Germans had it worse because of their resources were so poor. But meanwhile, in the Battle of Somme, right before British intelligence or lack of it led to more of a disaster for thousands of British soldiers. So they were kind of convinced that Germany focused on the south. And through that, they saw an opportunity. And the British High Command believed that the German lines at Somme were pretty weak and ready to crumble under pressure. Now, why do I say this, crumble under pressure? Well, they were pretty wrong about this. With a lot of confidence, the British pretty much opened up offensive artillery the very first few days. I mean, it was a barrage unlike anything anybody's ever seen. History records that they've expended over 1.5 million shells. And they rained that down upon the trenches, no man's land, and they scorched earth. But remember what I said before. The Germans themselves dug in so deep and so well, they were pretty much unfazed. But British intelligence didn't have any of that information because communication was very, very bad in those days, especially with visibility. So the Germans were pretty much dug in pretty deep during the bombardment, and German machine gunners were all set up. And machine guns were pretty much brand new to the war in those days. And keep in mind, during the Battle of Somme, the British soldiers pretty much haven't seen this type of fighting in a long time, and they had a lot of new recruits that were out there. It was more than 1 million individuals that were kind of involved on both sides of the war. And so when the artillery started striking hard and not being effective, the British pretty much had this idea that they were just going to just launch a full offensive and pretty much break the German lines. And, they couldn't be more wrong. The Germans were kind of pretty much ready, as we stated before. They marched forward in waves, the British army. And believing that their shells had pretty much wiped out the Germans, they first charged with 8,000 men. And when they were starting to cross no man's land, they pretty much came out of visibility as they moved forward in the lines. So German High Command, British High Command couldn't see them, and they couldn't see their soldiers as they were sending these waves. And in less than 15 minutes, 8,000 men were pretty much plowed down. They were gone. They were all dead. And the machine gunners, they basically cut them down row after row. Even before they even reached enemy lines. And communication, as I stated, was pretty much difficult in those days. And the land was kind of laden with deep fog, so the visibility was extremely low. So British High Command basically said, okay, let's go ahead and move forward and send a second wave, then a third wave, again and again. And they charged those lines 15 times total until they kind of got an idea that this wasn't a really good idea. And the result was pretty much a slaughter for the British troops. By the end of the day, and by the way, just one day, British casualties stood at over 50,000. And 19,000 were recorded dead, but there were pretty much more than that. There were about 35,000 British troops wounded, and it was considered the darkest day in history for the British Army. And all because They didn't know what they were walking into. Bad intel and arrogance pretty much killed these soldiers. And, it was a sad day. So I want to thank you for listening in on this video. I apologize for its length. Normally I try to do shorts, but I kind of wanted to get this one out there out of request from one of my professors, and I hope I did you guys well. Look into this. There's a lot of historical accounts on the Battle of Somme, and many people have interesting stories to tell. There's some good videos out there on survivors. I will link one of the videos to another YouTube video below, actually probably several, because there's some really good ones out there that record accurate accounts as well as interviews with survivors. Thank you again for visiting me, and I would like for you to like, subscribe, and share, and I will see you guys again. And oh, by the way, we are doing a second series on the Great Depression. I will link the first video below, and the next series is going to be on agriculture and how it affected the U.S. economically as well as globally, and the fight against Russian agriculture. So, again, have a good day, and I hope you enjoyed.